So right after Christmas, I made a trip to Michael's to pick up one of the grails, one of the Artist Loft art kits. I wanted to see what was left after Christmas, and I wanted to take advantage of the 50% off sale they were having on all of their Christmas goodies. So I went in wanting to buy a specific set, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but they were completely sold out. So this is the set I ended up picking up. As you guys can see, there weren't a lot of sets left, especially not compared to what we saw when I did my Michael's holiday gift guide. And you guys can check out that video in the cards right here. Hey guys, so I just got back from Michael's and I have something that I want to show you guys. But I have a little bit of prefacing to do first. So in the past few weeks with Christmas coming up, I've been doing a lot of work helping people find art supplies that might work for younger artists. And the topic of art kits was a hot topic on Twitter. There was a lot of discourse, a lot of argument about that. So I spent a lot of time researching those kind of art supplies so I can make curated recommendations for parents and guardians who are looking to buy good art supplies for their kids. But the idea of the kits never really left my mind. And I kept wondering if there was a kit made by like Michael's or Walmart or Hobby Lobby that I actually could recommend. And in my last review, I talked about the Hobby Lobby Master's Touch watercolor kit. I did not like it, do not buy it. So today I am talking about one of the Hobby Lobby kits. So while, what? Oh, Michael's kits, thank you. One of the Michael's kits made by their store brand, Artist Loft. So online, I did a little bit of crowdfunding to raise money for the kit I initially wanted to buy, which was the 140-piece Ultimate Drawing Kit, and I'll include a picture of that right here. Just cut it. So this is the set I actually wanted to get. It's the Artist Loft 140-piece deluxe drawing kit, and this is focused more on dry media. So it includes all sorts of goodies from watercolor pencils to dry chalk pastels to color pencils to drawing pencils to markers. It comes with a mannequin as well as wicker and charcoal and blending stubs. So this was the set I really wanted to review, but it was sold. So you guys can see it's a big kit. It has a lot of pieces to it. Almost all of them are dry media. And the reason I was interested in that kit is I thought it would be the kit that had the highest success rate for me. It had the most supplies that I would feel confident reviewing. And it also seemed like it would have the highest quality supplies. I also just kind of liked how that kit came together. Now, I'd seen it a few times at Michael's and I didn't buy it before Christmas because at that time I decided I wasn't going to do kits, and then I decided I was going to do kits because that's just how I roll. And I ended up doing a little bit of crowdfunding on my coffee to raise money to buy the kit so that I wouldn't be paying that money out of pocket, and that way people who wanted to support me reviewing it could contribute $3 towards the purchase of that. Now, anyway, as you can see, I don't have that kit. I have a different kit. Same price, slightly different. I'm actually just as disappointed as you guys are that I didn't get the 140-piece kit. That was the one I thought would be actually good. What we have here is my second pick. It is the Artist Loft All Media Artist Set, and it comes in what feels like a metal box. And there's a lot of different stuff inside. There's acrylic, there's watercolor, there's oil, there's color pencils, watercolors, oil pastels, synthetic brushes, an eraser, 3 palettes, metal hole, 2-hole metal sharpener, and a booklet. Now, when I was looking at the other kit, I really wanted to avoid the acrylics, the oils, the pastels, because those are all materials I don't really like and I don't really use, and I didn't want to review them and my prejudice against the media color my review. But since this is kind of what we have left, this was the nicest of the kits Michael's has still in stock, we're just going to kind of roll with it, and I just wanted to disclose my bias that my opinions on oils, because I don't even use oils, I've never used oils, my opinion on acrylics and my opinion on pastels may just be my own bias. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and packaging and we'll zoom in so you guys can get a better look at this kit. Okay, pause it. Okay, all right, so I'm gonna go ahead and remove the belly band, but I'm gonna keep a hold of that. So this is a, I don't know if it's metal, it might be plastic, but it certainly looks like metal case. It's got some texture to it. It does have metal supports. It has, these are metal corners. I thought they were plastic, but they're not. It has a carrying handle and it has 2 latches, so it is a briefcase. And what this kit does is it lifts out, which is a very neat mechanism. But one of the things I want to warn you guys about these kind of kits is that the nicer the container, generally, the less money is being spent on the materials inside. And that can vary from brand to brand. Some brands do anniversary kits that come in the nice wooden boxes. Those are typically pretty high quality. But when we're working with a store brand like this or like Master's Touch, the nicer the cases, generally the less quality the products are going to be. And originally this case was $64, but it's 50% off right now, and I got it for around $32. So over here are our Artist Loft Watercolor Pencils, our Artist Loft Color Pencils. In here we have our Artist Loft Acrylics. We have our 3 mixing palettes. It's pretty tiny. I cannot see mixing acrylics in this. We have a little kidney bean palette here. All of these are actually pretty sturdy plastic. We have our synthetic brushes in here, and they all seem to be very cheap synthetic brushes, but we'll take a look at that a little bit later. We have our eraser, we have our sharpener, we have our booklet, which is actually, all right, not bad. It does have some tips and techniques in it. We have our oil and our watercolor, and then we have our pastels. So this really is a mixed media kit. The only thing I think we're kind of missing would be like graphite media and maybe marker media, which is what the 140 piece kit that I wanted to review had in it. Now, what am I going to do with this kit once I finish reviewing it? I aim to donate it to the St. Charles Parish Library System so that the kids over there have access to more art supplies that they can check out of the library. And that's been kind of my plan with a lot of these art supply reviews, with these things that I may not see myself using in the future, but I still want to be able to give an opinion on. I want to donate them so that other people can enjoy them. So I think in the future, I'm going to crowdfund more of my reviews. So if you want to have a bit of a say in what I review here on this channel, keep an eye on the community tab and keep an eye on my Twitter at twitter.com/nattosoup for more information on that. So what we are going to do in the next part of the review is we are going to swatch almost all of the materials inside. I think the only thing I'm going to avoid are those oil paints, because I really don't have any experience with oils whatsoever. I don't really know how to use them at all, and I don't think I am any judge for that. So, but I do have experience with acrylics, even though I don't like them. I do have a lot of experience with watercolor, and I have experience with color pencils, so I feel like I can speak to all of those things. So the case itself does seem fairly sturdy. It does seem like something you could bring with you to, say, your grandparents' house, or maybe even on a trip. Everything inside the case seems fairly secure. The pencils are stored in plastic trays, which are secured in the tiers. The tier mechanism works fairly smoothly. Unlike the Master's Touch kit, things haven't started falling out or getting loose. Everything seems to be in here pretty snug, and just in general, this does seem like it's a better kit than the Master's Touch. And Artist Loft did have a lot of different kits this Christmas, and I really would like to review that 140 piece ultimate drawing kit. So I'd love to see Artist Loft and Michaels consider bringing that out and just making it maybe a part of their yearly sales, because that could be a kit that could be a really great present for a kid for a birthday, or like a graduation from 8th grade sort of gift, something like that. I'd really love to get my hands on that kit. So anyway, I will see you guys in the unboxing swatch portion. We're gonna change the camera angle just a little bit. So everything in this kit seems to be Artist Loft necessities, which seems to be their lowest tier. I'm just guessing here because the Artist Loft necessities thing is kind of new, but it seems to be kind of like not the student stuff, but like the beginner or I guess student but not children's grade Artist Loft. And when I was picking a Plan B set, I wanted to get a set that didn't include those cake style / chiclet style watercolors, because usually when I see those in a kit, that's a kiss of death for me. That's when I know this is not a kit for adults or for older teens, but it's a kit aimed at younger children who don't necessarily know any better. And my mom is currently flipping through the book that came with this kit, so we're going to take a look at some of the stuff inside that book. Okay, so this is the little Artist Tools and Techniques book that came with the kit, and it's actually a sizable little book. Would you mind flipping through it? So they've got all sorts of things. They kind of explain all the materials in the book in 3 different languages, as well as some drawing basics, but what's kind of unusual is they don't include any graphite, anything in this box. Not even a pencil. And while I wouldn't use this as like the entirety of my home art education, this plus the internet or your local library could provide a really solid foundation, especially if you don't have access to art classes. And they talk about the different materials in the kit, which I also like because it empowers you to use the present that you've been given, which is nice. They talk about using different toned papers and using tape for masking. They talk about using a blending stump or tortillon, which is kind of funny because the set didn't come with any of those. You can also use a Kleenex or a chamois for that though. They talk about their color pencils and the sharpener and the eraser included. How to hold the pencil, the different types of marks you can make. So this is really neat because the artist who received this set could use this as kind of a primer to learn how to use the materials in it. And then as they are more confident, then they could purchase more expensive materials. They talk about, and it doesn't show like Nebulous branded stuff, it shows their brand stuff. So a lot of this, although not everything, is stuff in this kit. So you don't necessarily have to go out and buy a bunch of additional things either, which is the allure of a kit. And they talk about the watercolor paint. You know what? Since I don't know how to use oils, maybe I'll use the instructions in this book. And that way I can actually speak to whether or not the instruction in this book is any good. And they tell you what materials you're going to need as well. So that's pretty impressive. I feel like sometimes with these kits, I feel like there was no thought put into the kit. But this one, I actually feel like whoever put this together cared.
Oil paint techniques.
Yeah. And I mean, Michaels would sell the additional stuff you needed, like a palette knife or blending stumps. Depending on the quality of this kit too, this could be maybe something that classrooms look into having a few on hand. Anyway, so far not bad. I look forward to swatching these things and getting a closer look at them. Thank you for flipping through the book for me. Okay, go. Okay, art nerds, we're gonna have to break the illusion of a neat, tidy, and clean recording surface for this part of the review because, as you guys know, I'm in Luling, so I don't have my normal recording space, but also this is a big set. So today we're going to work on the unbox and swatch portion of the Artist Loft 120 piece all media art set. I purchased this kit because there's been a lot of talk about art kits and whether or not they're any good for younger artists or any good as art gifts. And I didn't really have a lot of experience as an adult artist with art kits, so I wanted to kind of put it through the field test and see for myself if this is something that could be a viable option. So we have our large metal case. You really get a lot. When they say 120 pieces, sometimes with cheaper kits, they count like every page in a booklet or every page in a sketchbook that might come with it. But you really do get about 126 pieces here. You get a lot of watercolor pencils, color pencils, acrylic paints, oil paints, watercolor paints, oil pastels, brushes, 2 palettes, a water well, an eraser, and a metal bodied pencil sharpener. So I'm really kind of looking forward to diving into this kit, exploring it with you guys. And I also kind of decided that since I don't know how to use oils at all, I was going to use the booklet that came from this set to maybe get the basics of oils rather than like looking them up online. And that would allow me to decide whether or not this book is actually useful as an art resource guide. I think it has a lot of good basic tips that'll get you started. I want to see if someone who does have some art experience would be able to pick up a whole new medium just from this book. So what we're going to do today is we're going to kind of take a closer look at everything inside this kit, and we're going to swatch everything. And for the swatching, I have Canson XL watercolor paper. I have a Master's Touch mixed media pad. And I also have some mini canvases that I picked up at Dollar Tree. Now, since this case takes up so much space, and since we have so many things to swatch, normally I would do this as a live stream, but just kind of based on some of the conditions that I have here now, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to swatch everything one by one in time lapse, and I'm going to voice over with my thoughts on each individual product. And I'm going to move this whole case off camera. That way I actually have some space to work. So we're going to start with the Artist Loft watercolor pencils. These are hexagonal watercolor pencils. They have kind of a red metallic cap at the end. The body screening says Artist Loft Necessities Watercolor, and then it has the color name. There are 28 total watercolor pencils in this set, and they come pre-sharpened, but there is a double-sided metal sharpener. Kind of reminds me of the comb sharpeners you guys see me use pretty frequently. It might be a magnesium sharpener, and it has a large hole and it has a smaller hole for sharpening. And the paper I'm going to test these on is Canson XL watercolor paper. And I'm going to do dry swatches, and then I'm going to blend those out with water. So when I was swatching these pencils, I noticed that they're kind of hard and there's not a lot of pigment, and they're really pretty dusty. The color on the outside of the pencil is also not indicative of what you're actually going to get when you use the pencils. And some colors are really pretty weak and unimpressive. Once I added water, I noticed that they have really weak activation, some of the weakest I've encountered since I've started reviewing watercolor pencils. So next we're going to do a blended color wheel, and those of you who have watched some of my other watercolor pencil reviews will find this very familiar. So what I'm doing is I am going to select, I would normally select 2 yellows, 2 reds, and 2 blues. And that is what I'm going to do right now. And I'm kind of using my swatches here to help me select the colors that I'm going to use. So we're going to use ginger yellow, lemon yellow, red, magenta, ultramarine blue, and cobalt blue for our color wheel. And I'm just going to do it right here. So I decided to do a color wheel kind of inspired by some of my other watercolor pencil reviews, and I noticed that these have a really waxy application and the colors do not blend and mix very well. Due to the low pigmentation, it's difficult to get the kind of colors that you may want from these, so I was really pretty disappointed in them. Alright, so I'm going to put this aside and let it dry. But overall, my verdict for these watercolor pencils so far is I'm just really not impressed with their quality. They're very anemic in terms of color. They don't really deliver a whole lot. And I feel like even some of the Crayola products I've reviewed had better color delivery than these Artist Loft color pencils. So that's something to definitely keep in mind. So next we're gonna move on over to the color pencils in this set. The color pencils in the Artist Loft set are round-bodied color pencils. They have full body screening with a taupe cap on the other end. They've come pre-sharpened, but some of them are a bit broken already. Maybe they broke in transit. I haven't had a chance to use them, so I don't really know any other way that they might have broken. So you may have received some broken pencils with your set. The body says Artist Loft Necessities, and it has the color name at the end. And there are 28 colors. I am swatching the Artist Loft color pencils on Canson XL watercolor paper because it does have some tooth and it's a fairly sturdy pencil, or fairly sturdy paper. Alright, so we've got our swatches down. The next thing I want to do is I want to do a blended rainbow to see how well these colors blend into each other. I lost some of the footage when I was doing the swatches, so I'm just going to make up for lost time now while I'm doing the blending test. So the Artist Loft color pencils are more buttery and pigmented than the watercolor pencils. Some of the colors are too similar. There's a good range of colors, and the body doesn't necessarily indicate the lead inside, much like with the watercolor pencils. They're fairly blendable, and I feel like I'm getting decent coverage, and I would compare these to Crayola or even the modern waxy Prismacolor, where they're somewhat pigmented, they're somewhat buttery, but there's definitely better color pencils on the market. All right, that's about it for our color pencils. I think they're more pigmented than the watercolor pencils. Let's check back in. They're still drying, but they're mostly dry. But you guys can hopefully see there's a pretty, I would say a pretty strong difference between how pigmented the color pencils are and how kind of muted the watercolor pencils are. I would assume they would be made using the same pigments with just different binders. The color selection is pretty similar, but it's not quite identical. And I found the color pencils to be a little bit more usable than the watercolor pencils. And I also think they're a little bit higher quality. Now, both the watercolor pencils, hexagonal bodies, and the color pencils, round bodies, feature solid wooden cores. So this isn't like it's composite. And when I first opened the box, I really wish there was smell-o-vision, because there is this beautiful aroma that you get when you go into an art store, rather than the smell of China, poorly produced art supplies, off-gassing. So that's definitely a perk in my opinion. Instead of it smelling like chemicals, it just smelled like wood and art supplies. So we have finished up with our mainly dry media, pencil media. Next, we're going to move on and do the oil pastels, since those are another fairly dry media. And although you guys can't see it, they are on the second tier of this big box. Next, we're taking a look at the Artist Loft Oil Pastels. We have 4 sets of 6 pastels, so 24 pastels total. And they're small little oil pastels. They don't even have the color on them. It just says Artist Loft Necessities in 3 different languages, and then confirms to ASTM D4236. So I am going to swatch these on watercolor paper, since it's kind of a nice sturdy all media paper. I'm going to swatch all 24 colors. And then I think I'm going to try doing a little bit of color blending like we did with the color pencils. So the Artist Loft oil pastels smell like crayons, and they don't smell like Craypas or other oil pastels. I don't get that scent of linseed oil. They're a bit smaller than other oil pastels that I've used, and there's 24 of them total. They're very dusty and very patchy. I feel like these are really dry for pastels. They're difficult to remove from the packaging, and I feel like they're inferior to Craypas. These are too waxy. They're like blunt, small rose art or crazy art crayons, not like oil pastels at all. I really did not enjoy using these oil pastels. So when doing the blend test, I found that these were difficult to blend because there's not enough pigment and there's not enough oil to really blend these. So they're a lot like using crayons. All I can say about the Artist Loft oil pastels is these are terrible. These are the worst pastels I've ever used. So we are about done with the oil pastels. So we've done the watercolor pencils, the color pencils, and the oil pastels. Next, I'm going to start moving into some of our tube-based art supplies. So our acrylics, our watercolors, and our oils. Alright, so we have done the color pencils, the watercolor pencils, we've done the oil pastels. Next I'm going to do the acrylics in here. Then I'm going to, actually, I'd like to stick with the watercolor paper, so I retract that. I'm actually going to start with the watercolors down here. Then I'll do the acrylics and the oils on the canvas pads that I have. So the watercolors, this is a really nice box, but they are a little bit hard to get to in this sort of format. I also typically don't like tube watercolors straight from the tube. I like to dry them in half pans and then use them that way. So this is not necessarily, I would have liked to have seen this set maybe include, maybe I could put my dots in one of these and this will give me a chance to use one of these. So we have 12 watercolors, and each of these little daisies is actually smaller than 12, so maybe I'll use both of them and then just wash them out before we move on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove them. Now, something I want to say about this kit is it holds everything really securely. The Master's Touch kit I reviewed, I can actually grab that for you guys so you guys can see what I'm talking about. This little kit here from Hobby Lobby does not hold things securely at all. However, I am kind of struggling to remove some of the products from their containment, from their prisons. So each watercolor tube is 0.2 fluid ounces. It's the same size as the oils. And I'm going to remove all of them for you guys. So one of the pros about this set is if you were to travel with it, nothing's going anywhere. Everything is going to stay really securely in place. The build quality on the kit is actually pretty good. I wouldn't check it as like a check bag just because I've seen how those get thrown around. But I think if you were to bring it as your carry-on or put it in your carry-on, it would survive quite well. So this could be a good art kit for someone who needs to travel back and forth a lot, maybe a kid who has split custody between parents or someone who goes to visit family often. I would not personally use this as, say, a convention kit just because the materials don't really lend themselves to the sort of work I do at conventions. It's also, this kit itself does take up a lot of space, and I think quality half pans might have been a better inclusion than tubes, but I know you can kind of get away with cheaper watercolors with tubes that'll still perform all right. So let's move that back out of the way. So we have 12 colors, and I'm going to use another sheet of Canson XL watercolor paper for this. I was going to wait to review all the accessories until kind of the end, but this is a good time to start doing it. So we have two really small little palettes. These are really not big enough for mixing color. They're barely big enough to just hold dots of paint. We also have 6 brushes. Let me pull those out for you guys. We have a yellow nylon flat, a yellow nylon round, and another yellow nylon round. All of them have sizing in them. That's the stiffening agent that protects them in transit, so that needs to be washed out. We also have 3 white synthetic brushes, same thing. Some of the tips are bent on these. There's really absolutely no reason why the tips should have been bent on them. And the brushes themselves are pretty poor quality. They are not the worst I've reviewed, but they're about on par with the brushes from the Master's Touch set. So not really pleased with them. Synthetic brushes are pretty cheap. I don't know why they went even cheaper than pretty cheap. They certainly could have included nicer brushes. That would not be a frustration. I would recommend, if you get this set, that you just go ahead and trash these brushes and pick up some synthetic brushes that you like better and just slot them into those holes. So I'm going to wash out the sizing. I'm going to put a dot of each color in these 2 little pans, and we're going to start our swatches. So with the Artist Loft watercolor tubes, we get 12 colors. The tubes are metal and they have to be punctured using the cap. There's a really strong chemical smell to these, but they're better than the Master's Touch watercolors. They're more saturated and there's more optical brighteners used, so they're gonna kind of stand off on the page a little bit better. The brushes themselves are orange nylon and white nylon, with the orange nylon being softer than the white. And the 7-inch or the number 7 round is too stubby for a number 7 round. And the orange nylon is probably for the watercolors, whereas the white nylon is stiffer than the orange, and it's probably for acrylics and oils. And I would say, even though we get 6 brushes, we need more size variants. The little palettes are really only useful for doing watercolor dots, as you guys can see here. The paints are not very pigmented and they use a lot of paint to cover very little area, and the strong chemical smell ended up migrating to my hands and stayed on my hands for several hours. So if you're sensitive to strong smells, these watercolors are not for you. These palettes are also just too small to be useful, and the water dish is also too small to be useful, and as you can see, with so little water, it gets polluted quickly. And you guys can see from this muddy water dish that it's full of optical brighteners. I feel like these watercolors are not particularly strongly pigmented. They are more pigmented than the Master's Touch, but they're still kind of weak compared to, say, Reeves. And it was difficult to mix colors like oranges and greens using a 6-color triad. So if I had to recommend one of the two, I would recommend the Artist Loft kit over the Hobby Lobby kit. Alright, next we are going to start working with the acrylics that came in this set. Now they're very similar to the watercolor in terms of form function. They are 0.4 fluid millimeter tubes or 0.4 fluid ounce tubes or 12 millimeter tubes. And they're metal bodied and you use the top to pierce them. And I'm going to be swatching these on a small stretch canvas that I got from Dollar Tree. So I'll go ahead and open this up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to work from the tubes directly using the small white synthetic brush included in this kit. Now, as I mentioned earlier in this video, I'm not really a big oils or acrylic person, but I do actually have some experience with acrylics. I did a lot of acrylic stuff when I was in undergrad and I took a class in acrylics, so I'm familiar with Liquitex, I'm familiar with Basics, and I'm familiar with Golden. And some of these cheaper options just weren't available in Louisiana arts and crafts stores when I was buying acrylics 10 years ago. So I feel like it's pretty unfair to compare these to Golden and Liquitex. Those are kind of very well known for being quality acrylics. I don't really know what I can compare them to because that's what I have experience with using. I bought what my professor recommended I buy. So we'll see how this goes. I am glad to see though that the tubes for the acrylics are larger than the tubes for watercolor because acrylic is one of those mediums that tends to get used up pretty quickly. Now I'm also disappointed that they didn't include a large mixing palette since that tends to be useful for acrylics. And one of the things I'm reviewing this kit on is how inclusive it is. So I have a cup of clean water off to the side. I didn't really like that little mixing well and I don't want to use it for these. So I have my water off to the side. I have my brush and I'm ready to swatch. I feel like the acrylics were just the weakest part of this box. These are really weak acrylics. They are weak body and they are weak pigmentation. There's also a lot of air in the tubes. Many of these tubes were not fully filled. They deliver poor coverage with no pigment and light fast information as well as no transparency information. From swatching these, all of them seemed pretty transparent though. I am also disappointed that this set didn't include a large mixing palette. That would have been much easier for me to use with these acrylics. And as I'll show you guys later, these layer really poorly. So I let the acrylics dry for about an hour and came back to them and did another layer on top. And I found that they layer really poorly, and part of this is because all of the colors, even the white, are very transparent due to the low pigment load. They're very thin and they're kind of anemic, and they also reactivate prior layers, so you can't even layer acrylic like you normally would layer acrylic. These were really disappointing. So I kind of lied to you guys earlier, not intentionally, but it just slipped my mind. I actually do have some experience with really cheap acrylics. I used to use apple barrel acrylics when I was younger, and I would say apple barrel acrylics are better acrylics than these. So I'm going to clean up this mess, set this aside to fully dry, and we're going to start in on our final art supply, the oils. So I mentioned to you guys that everything in this box I am fairly familiar with the exception of oils. I've never done any kind of oil painting. I don't have any experience with oils. So I'm trusting the included book to kind of give me the guidance I need. And I think that's kind of how this set has been designed. This book is supposed to act as a guide to these new materials for you, and this kit feels like it was designed to be almost all-inclusive. So here's my problem with the oils. We get 12 oil paints. They come in little 0.2 fluid ounce tubes, same size as the watercolors, but oils are kind of a finicky medium. So first off, they recommend that we pick a set of brushes to use exclusively for oil painting. Oil must be thinned with turpentine or another mineral spirit, which makes cleanup more difficult than with water-soluble media. Brushes previously used with oil should have all traces of oil or turpentine removed before using with acrylic. It also recommends that you don't allow the paint to dry in the brush because oil is destructive to brushes, and that you should wash it thoroughly with thinner such as turpentine, then with soap and water. So here's the thing. This kit includes oils, but it doesn't include turpentine or mineral spirits. And it also says that oils are an ideal medium for beginners. The paints dry slowly, allow you to take your time and correct any mistakes. It's true, they do dry slowly, but the fact that you need turpentine or mineral spirits, both of which are highly volatile substances, they're fairly flammable substances, and both of them have a really strong odor, does not make this a medium I would recommend to younger artists. This is the necessities line, and I kind of feel like this kit was marketed to teenagers and younger artists, beginner artists, so I really have a problem with the inclusion of oil, and I'm going to talk about that more towards the end when we're talking about our pros and cons. So for the oil swatches, I'm at a bit of a loss because I don't have mineral spirits, I don't have turpentine, and I'm not going to go buy either so that I can review a kit. I'm just not. Your average 12 to 18-year-old is probably not going to have turpentine. I can't go down to Walmart and get turpentine. If I were to get turpentine in Luling, I'd have to go to one of the hardware stores, and then they would want to sell me a huge jug of it, and that might not even be artist grade turpentine. So I have a lot of problems with the inclusion of oils. I also don't have any way to clean my brush with these. So what I'm going to do is not really probably the right way to swatch oils. I'm just going to use my little Dollar Tree canvas, and I'm just going to smear a swatch so you guys can see. But I really can't speak to the quality of these oils. I cannot speak to a whole lot about them. So I'm just going to do my best with it, but I don't even have the materials I would need to be able to do anything with these because I'm lacking the mineral spirits and I'm lacking the turpentine. And I don't necessarily think this kit should include those things. I think they should have included anything else. Maybe some charcoal, maybe some more pencils, just anything else other than these oils. So let's go ahead and get these open. They're very similar to all the other art supplies in this kit where you can puncture the top with the, oh, it's hard to do because it doesn't want to go in and it wants to squirt out. Okay, so I'm going to do all of those and I'm going to swatch them for you guys. So with the oils, I can't help but feel like, why are these in here? They might be the nicest thing in this set though, which is pretty sad because it's the thing I can't actually use because they don't include any tools for oil. They don't come with linseed oil or turpentine. Now, my mom told me she does have some turpentine, so I may actually be able to use these. I'd have to go pick up some cheap brushes as well, but it's still really disappointing that they didn't include the materials you need. They are creamy, pigmented, and they do smell like linseed oil, so I feel like these are probably the highest quality product in the box. So from what I can tell by that very limited swatching I was able to do, these might be the best product in this kit. They're fairly buttery. They don't have this like overt smell of chemicals the way the acrylics did. They actually just smell like linseed oil, and they have pretty good pigmentation. It's a shame Artist Loft didn't include anything we could use with these. So I'm gonna get these picked up and we're gonna talk about this kit. Okay, so let's start off by discussing each art supply one by one, just kind of in brief. We're gonna start with the watercolor pencils since that's where we started. I felt like these were some of the poorest quality, but not the poorest quality watercolor pencils I've ever reviewed. There was just not a lot of pigment there, and they really didn't activate when water was added. They were not fun to use, and I cannot see child me thinking these were fun to use either. She liked color. The color pencils, however, did deliver color. They're more pigmented and more buttery than the watercolor pencils. They are better than the watercolor pencils, but I wouldn't say they're artist grade. I wouldn't say anything in this kit is artist grade. It might say Artist Loft, but it is not really for artists. I would have been okay with these as a teenager, especially when I hit that phase where I decided that Crayola was for little kids and I wasn't a little kid. This would have impressed me more just in terms of name recognition, but in terms of how they handle, they don't handle any better than Crayola, and I've reviewed a lot of Crayola, so I have some experience with it. If I were a teacher, just buying on quality alone, I would probably go with Crayola over these. Now I have reviewed a few color pencils. I don't really use a lot of color pencils anymore because they tend to aggravate my arthritis, so I find that kind of repetitive motion to be tiresome. So I don't spend a lot of time reviewing color pencils, and I mostly just use them to add additional elements to existing works that were either done with marker or done with watercolor. So let's move in to the interior of the kit. So after we finished with the color pencils, we played around with the oil pastels. These are glorified crayons and not good ones at that. They're smaller than your average oil pastel. There isn't enough oil in them, and there isn't enough pigment either. So they're just like sad, unpleasant to use waxy crayons. They're really not good. Then I did the watercolors, and the watercolors were not the worst. They didn't make me as angry as the Master's Touch watercolors. They're full of optical brighteners, but if I was a young artist and I received these, I'd be okay with them. I would say that Reeves makes better watercolors, but Winsor & Newton is discontinuing Reeves. However, I think they're probably going to be at Michael's for a little while longer. The alternative to the color pastels, I would say, go with Sakura Craypas. Most schools like Craypas. It's going to be more buttery, it's going to handle more like real oil pastels, and it's going to be just a better experience. I was using Sakura Craypas in 5th grade because my grandparents gave me a set, and they were my treasure. I loved those oil pastels so much. And Craypas are actually pretty inexpensive. You can see this is not impressive. We're not getting enough pigment, we're not getting enough color for us to even consider this an art supply, really. And while I'm showing you guys things, these are the watercolor pencil swatches, so you guys can see not a lot of color going on. And then these are the color pencil swatches, which do have more color, they do have more pigment, and they were more buttery to use. So So after we looked at the watercolors, or rather while we were looking at the watercolors, we also looked at the brushes that came in the set. You get 3 golden Taklon orange nylon brushes and 3 white nylon brushes. The real difference is the orange are just a smidgen softer than the white. So the orange are probably designed to be used with the watercolors and the watercolor pencils. The white are probably designed to be used with the acrylics. We also used both mini palettes. I think they're too small to be useful for color mixing, but they're just right for holding dots of watercolor and allowing you to paint. The downside to the watercolor is it goes really, really fast. You also have a small water well in here, but honestly, a cup, just a cup, nothing fancy. A cup would be great. So once we finished with the watercolor, we took a look at the acrylics. And these are some sad acrylics, y'all. I think even apple barrel acrylics are probably better quality. They do not have a lot of color. There's not a lot of pigment. They're very watery for acrylics. And yes, I did blend them out as like a faux grisé effect, because you can use watered down acrylics to either do glazes on top of colors or underneath for an underpainting. So it's a pretty common technique. I also tried layering the colors to see if I could kind of build up more color. Not really. So the acrylics were also just pretty frustrating to use. You could get cheap apple barrel acrylics from Walmart or from Michaels. You can get them in all sorts of different colors, and you're going to be a lot happier with those than you will be with these. Then finally, we took a look at the oils. Now, this was my first time using oils. I've never used oils before, and I was really disappointed and frustrated that the oils we have, we can't really use them without outside materials. And I was really hoping that this kit would be as inclusive as possible, since that's usually why people give kits. The oils, you would need a separate brush for them because you don't want to cross-contaminate them. If you use a brush that's been used with oils with your acrylics, the oil is going to interfere with how the water reacts to the acrylic. And we also weren't provided with any of the thinners that are typically used, and they do actually make, there are actually water-soluble oils on the market. Several companies make them. I was really disappointed, but not surprised to see that these were not water-soluble oils. That would have been a good fit. That would have been a good idea. But you actually need turpentine or mineral spirits to really be able to use these. Quality-wise, I think they might be the nicest thing in this kit. They don't smell overly chemically, unlike the acrylics and the watercolors, which had this really strong cloying kind of chemical smell. They really just smell like linseed oil, which is what you want from oils, and they're pretty buttery and pigment. They're some of the most pigmented things in this entire kit. Now, I didn't get a chance to try out the pencil sharpener or the eraser. I am sure that's going to come up during the field test, but I think we did a pretty good job of trying just about everything in this kit. So I want to go over the pros and cons of this particular kit, and then I just kind of want to talk to you guys about kits in general and why I'm reviewing this. So the pros for this kit is the case is great. It's really well made. Everything is very smooth. There's nothing unfinished about it. The plastic trays are very sturdy. They hold everything in place. If you travel with this kit, things aren't going to fall out. And after reviewing the Master's Touch kit, I have come to appreciate a kit where things don't just go falling out because they're not securely fastened into the kit itself. In fact, I think this kit is a much better kit than the Master's Touch kit. Just the watercolors and the brushes are way better than the Master's Touch kit. So that is a win for Artist Loft and for Michaels. The color pencils are okay. The tube watercolors are okay. And the included Artist Loft booklet, which comes with a lot of the kits they have this year, including the one I really wanted to do, it touches on the basics of everything very, very briefly. I would actually use this as a guide for what to Google rather than as a guide for itself. In fact, I was really disappointed with the lack of information they provided in the oil section, since I don't know anything about oils. I do like that they do show the Artist Loft products that you're going to be using. However, I don't like that, and it's specific to the oil pastels. They actually play a switcheroo. So these are the cheap Artist Loft pastels they give us. And then these are actually much higher quality artist pastels in order to get that deep pigmentation. And then these are pastel pencils. We didn't even get pastel pencils in this book. So I would have liked to have seen Artist Loft actually utilize the products they include in this guide rather than just nicer versions, better quality versions of the pencils. And they're guilty of this in the watercolor section as well, because with the watercolors they included, this would be pretty difficult to achieve. So I feel like there was a bit of a bait and switch there. Also, you'll notice on the back of my book, there's some discoloration. That's because it was sitting directly on top of oil pastels. So maybe having a sheet of parchment paper or wax paper in these bottom trays upon first purchase would prevent that from happening. So what about the cons? The oils that came in this set are not inclusive. There's no palette, no mixing oils, no turpentine. I kind of wonder why they even included them. Artist Loft could have very cheaply included pencils. They already make pencils. They could have included charcoals. They already make charcoals. They could have included even some markers. They already make markers. So why oils you can't use? And then what's really frustrating is that these oils might be the best thing in this kit. So that makes me wonder, well, why include some of these other things they've included? Why not just support the oils that you actually have in here? The oils are also messy, slow to dry, and finicky, and that's a strange choice for a necessity set, and a strange choice for a set that is probably being purchased by parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles to give to teenagers as a step up from their existing Crayola art supplies. The oil pastels are subpar. They're more like crayons. These are really disappointing. Good oil pastels are really fun to play with. These are a punishment. The watercolor pencils are just too weak. They're really kind of cheap for what they are. And then the palettes are just too small to really be useful. I'm looking at this set as an artist and channeling my inner child Beck, and I know there's a lot of things in this set that would have frustrated me, and that's what's really disappointing. These kind of sets, these kind of kits should be designed in such a way that people who love artists, parents, grandparents, siblings, aunts, uncles, friends can buy for artists and buy something that's going to be good or going to be decent or going to be thought out, and be able to just give an all-inclusive thing instead of having to research a bunch of products and then put together a custom kit. That's the whole appeal of kits, is that it's ready to go, it's ready to be used. And this kit is very hit or miss, and I'm really disappointed because, to be fair, it wasn't my first choice, but it wasn't a bad second choice either. I wasn't really that upset about it being my second choice. And now I'm disappointed in it. I'm sad. So I had my Twitter, well, okay, I did a little bit of a crowdfunding thing. I may have mentioned this earlier in the video, where I put up a goal on my coffee and requested that people tip $3 towards the purchase of this kit. So about 10 different people tipped me $3 so I could buy this kit, which thank you guys so much. I feel bad now because they gave me their money to buy this kit to review, and I don't like this kit. I was kind of hoping I would, because I really wanted to find a good art kit that I could recommend to parents. I mean, when I was in Michael's just doing my gift guide, I was stopped by like 3 different dads who didn't have a clue what to buy their artistic kids, but they wanted to give them something good. And that's where kits could really shine. They could really be good. So as an artist, as somebody who reviews art supplies, as somebody who teaches younger artists, I'm a big fan of giving the best you can afford for that age range. And I'm really kind of disappointed in this kit, especially if you bought this kit full price. Because this kit is a $64 kit full price. Nothing in this kit adds up to that price point. You're basically paying for a nice box. Now, I got it half off. I got it for $30, so I don't feel like I was really that cheated. But I'm frustrated because I can think of a better analog that is not that expensive for every one of these products. So for the watercolor pencils, really, I would just say with watercolor pencils, because they're cheap enough, get Supercolor 2 or get Derwent Inktense. They're a little bit more expensive, but they're really, really nice. They're going to last a long time. They're going to grow with your artist. I still use and love Supercolor 2 and Derwent Inktense. For the color pencils, I would recommend, maybe, I hate to say this, going with Crayola. Crayola is really not bad, especially the Crayola Signature line. Their signature color pencils have an oil core, which is going to make them really creamy and easy to blend. They're really very nice for what they are, and they come in a nice metal tin as well. Or if it's really about the brand, I guess Prismacolor. I think Prismacolor has gotten really crummy over the years, and they've gotten really waxy and really brittle, so it's hard for me to recommend Prismacolor pencils, but they would be an improvement over these. But these are not the worst part of this kit. For the art book, literally any art techniques book at Barnes & Noble in the half off section is going to give you more than this. I have a dozen of those kind of books that I purchased over the years, and all of them are going to give you more info than this. Just go to the local library and check out something from their art section. It's free. Craypas are going to be way better than this. They're really not that expensive. For the watercolors, Reeves would be better. Grumbacher Academy would be better. Winsor & Newton Cotman would be better. But if you really want to give a nice gift of watercolor, the Daniel Smith Essential 6 set would be nice, although it's more pricey. It's 25 bucks. The Sennelier Test set is only 5 colors, but they're really, really nice watercolors, and they'll grow with your artist. Or even the Sakura Koi set. And this is hit or miss. Some artists really hate this set. I really like this set. A lot of colors, a lot of mixing palettes. You get a water brush, you get a little cleaning thing, and there's even a, let me reassemble that for you guys real quick. There's even just a field loop on the back, so you can take it with you and do plein air painting. I really like that little set as well. For the acrylics, I would say Apple Barrel is better than these. Golden makes really nice acrylics. Liquitex makes really nice acrylics. But with any art gift, find out what kind of art your artist likes to make, because a comic artist is probably not going to use acrylics, and an oil painter is probably not going to use watercolor pencils that often. So you can save some money and you can save some stress if you know what your artist already likes. And if you guys ever need help shopping for an artist, you guys can reach out to me through email at becca.hilburn@gmail.com. Let me know what they're into, and I'm happy to try and make some recommendations for you, because I really just want to help you guys find art supplies that people will love. I just want to help bridge that gap. You know, I'm passionate about art supplies. I'm passionate about art. I'm crazy about comics, and I want to remove as many barriers to entry as possible. And working with the best art supplies you can afford at the time is a great way to kind of ease yourself over that gap. Now, regarding these brushes, Princeton Snap is Princeton's cheapest line of synthetic brushes. If you can find them, not all stores carry them. They're actually pretty good synthetics, and they would also work okay for acrylics. But the white nylon, they're actually fine. They're not that bad. As for these palettes, you can go to Dollar Tree and get bigger, better little watercolor palettes than these that are going to be more useful. Or you can go to their cutlery section, their dishware section, and just get a white ceramic plate. And that's going to work really well for color mixing. And rather than a little well, you can just use a cup of water. It's really not that complicated. So I am still on the search for a good kit, a kit that doesn't make us cry. I'm sure Faber-Castell makes good kits. I am sure Winsor & Newton makes good kits. They're like established art supply brands do make good kits, but stores like Hobby Lobby and Michael's and Walmart don't always sell those kits. So I kind of went with what I knew the stores would have. So I want to thank you guys so much for joining me for this really big unboxing swatch. I want to thank those of you who have donated / contributed money to the coffee fund that allowed me to purchase this kit. I am going to do a field test with this kit in the future, but I think I'm going to limit it to the watercolors, the color pencils, the watercolor pencils, and the brushes and the palettes, rather than trying to use the oil pastels, the acrylics. I may use some of the acrylics, And the oils, I just can't use the oils as is. There's just nothing in this kit that will allow me to use the oils, and that's really frustrating. And then, once I've finished my review, I'm going to donate this kit because there are people out there who would love this kit, who would be delighted to have a big, beautiful art kit like this, and who could put it to really good use. So I will be more than happy to pass it on when I'm done with it so that others can enjoy it. So I hope you guys found this helpful. I hope you found it useful, and I hope you guys found it informative. If you like what I do and you want to help me to continue to do these kind of reviews in the future, please join me over at patreon.com/natosoup. That's a great way to support the work that I do here on this channel. It does get kind of expensive, so your help is always greatly appreciated. These are the watercolor pencils. These are the color pencils. These are the oil pastels. These are the watercolor swatches. These are the acrylic swatches. And these are the oil swatches. And if you guys ever need help shopping for art supplies, or if you're looking for recommendations, feel free to hit me up through email or on my Twitter at twitter.com/natosoup. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys again really soon. Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye.